You're listening to the JD Rucker Show. Let's begin. Hello, my friends, and welcome to another episode of the JD Rucker Show. You know, I've said before, and I'll say it again tonight, that I am not a big fan of chit-chat. Now, we've been trying to do more chit-chat in the beginning of the episodes because a lot of people don't make it in exactly 9 p.m. Pacific, midnight Eastern. They need a little bit of time, and I think it's considered a best practice or standard operating procedure to do the chit-chat for the first 5-10 minutes of a show. But I've said before, and I'll say it again, probably for the last time, I hate doing that. I don't like chit-chat. I like to cut straight to the news. So that's what we're going to start doing. We're going to go with a slightly different format than what you're probably used to. Hopefully you won't hate me for it. I'm going to do it whether anybody hates it or not, because I think it's the right thing to do. We've got a big show today. Got 5 stories, which is actually not very many compared to a lot of the shows we've been doing lately. But this one, again, it's important. We are going to try to keep track of all of the stories at all times. I got this nifty little chalkboard that we put together that we're going to be using going forward. And unless it's totally bombs and you guys go to jdrucker.com/talk and say, hey, ixnay on the chalkboard. But yeah, this way I can keep my thoughts straight. Anybody who comes in late can see what we're talking about, what we have talked about. And yeah, we'll see. Technology, we're getting nifty or something, or at least more organized. So today we're going to be talking about this one story that, it wasn't. This is more speculative than anything else, but I wanted to throw it out there because some people are starting to talk about how Democrats are on the verge of dying on the hill of defending transgender girls, right? That's what they call themselves. Boys and girls sports. So we have, are Democrats going to abandon boys in girls sports? Pretty straightforward. Then we'll talk about the positive jobs report that came out today, and not just the report itself, but also, perhaps more importantly, what happened, or what this represents. Because for the American people, for those who are, for example, if you're in a public job and maybe you're getting concerned that you're going to get doged, you're going to lose your job because you're in the public sector. Well, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I just want to encourage people. The next big adventure might be in the private sector for if you're a government employee, so be ready for that. White House hails positive job report, as they should, especially on the manufacturing and automotive side of things. Peacemaker, Trump has both Putin and Zelensky ready for a truce. Now, this is a story that, it's when we talk about the art of the deal, a lot of times I think people assume that majority of the art of the deal is all about, going in there and negotiating and having a strong position and this, that, or the other. A lot of times it's just a matter of knowing when to put information out there, knowing when not to allow information to go out there, and timing everything. Timing is so important in really every aspect of life. But when it comes to negotiations, especially something as critical, as existential, as war, I think that President Trump is the guy that we want working with both Vladimir Putin and Vladimir Zelensky, or whoever is pulling his strings. The most dangerous, under-the-radar Democrat is going after Nancy Pelosi. I've been wanting to do this story for a long time. I've been wanting to talk more about the person that I consider to be one of the top 5 most dangerous Democrats or leftists, really, in the United States of America. Somebody who makes people like Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Pocahontas Warren or even his former boss, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Saikat Chakrabarty makes them all look like they're moderates. This guy is he's not a Marxist. He's basically Karl Marx reincarnated and speaking English. And then last but not least, could laws that were quote-unquote signed by Joe Biden be voided? There's this Autopen scandal that you're probably going to hear about. If you get your news through legacy media, you're probably going to hear more about it maybe next week. We have a tendency of talking about some stories that are way ahead. Sometimes we talk about old stories, but then there are times when we're ahead of the game. We actually started talking about the scandal with with Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey requesting an investigation into whether or not Joe Biden's mental acuity should be questioned during the final stages of his term as president of the United States. And I would say that we need to go all the way back. I mean, it's very possible that he was suffering from dementia and not fulfilling his role, his duties as president of the United States from the very beginning. I mean, we were talking about during the campaign, the 2020 presidential campaign, about how this guy's toast. So I would argue that Pam Bondi or whoever, because Andrew Bailey did leave it open for her to even assign it to non-DOJ investigators. He just wants it looked into. And what we're now discovering, thanks to this story, is that not only was Joe Biden probably not in charge, but somebody may have been signing on his behalf, which would make everything that he did, including pardons. A lot of people have been asking about pardons. Yes, sir. The pardons would be included as something that could be reversed by the courts as a result of them not having valid signatures by a cognitively capable president of the United States. So it is going to be a very big show today. Not necessarily a long show. I don't think we're going to go longer than probably an hour and maybe an hour, probably less than an hour and a half today. But because we've only got the 5 stories. But it will be an extremely important show. And I would strongly recommend, if you would, please check out my sponsors at Promise Grounds. Go to jdrucker.com/coffee, jdrucker.com/coffee, and see what a Christian coffee company can do for you. Now, to be clear, I've said it before, I'll say it again. It's not just the fact that I like these guys and I love their company. It's the fact their coffee is absolutely insanely good. Now, I don't even know which ones I buy because they're on auto ship. And they end up, we've got a system for the coffee here. The kids take the coffee out of the bags, put them in the little bin. So I don't know if I've seen an actual bag in a year? Over a year that I've been drinking it, but it is fantastic, and I do highly recommend it. Get the whole bean if you can. Grind it yourself. That's what I do. And then have it fresh. So, jdrucker.com/coffee. Let's go ahead and get into this first story about boys and girls sports. Are Democrats on the verge of abandoning their defense of boys playing in girls sports, or is this going to be the hill that they die on? At this point, I'm at 50-50 on it, okay? It could go either way. I wouldn't be surprised if they did try to pull a defund the police maneuver on their stance regarding boys playing in girls sports. And for those who aren't familiar, the defund the police maneuver is standard operating procedure anymore for the Democrat Party. They come up with a really horrible policy stance, and then when it fails, they say it was actually the Republicans that did it. That actually happened with defund the police. Every Democrat and their dog, following the George Floyd videos, every single Democrat was like, you know what? We should defund the police. We need to defund the police. We need to defund the police. And then after they were actually able to accomplish defunding the police in several major cities and watch crime skyrocket, watch themselves, even crimes in their own privileged neighborhoods, crime was going up there, and then all of a sudden it's like, wait a second, we can't do this. And the people started complaining. It's like, well, you know what? It was actually the Republicans. It was the Republicans that were defunding the police, not us. We were never, we've always been at war with East Asia. Yes, it was a very 1984-ish move, but that's something that I expect we're going to see again with the whole transgender sports thing. We're seeing it in legacy media. I actually have a clip here. Let me find the clip. We're seeing it in legacy media where they're doing this. They're actually starting to give Democrats cover. They're taking old news and presenting it as if it's new, almost like, hey, here's some new information for you to be able to evolve your policy stance. Here, watch. There it is. Watch.
Such a clear trend among the American public. So transgender female athletes in women's sports, only 18% of the country says that they should be, in fact, allowed to participate in women's sports. Compare this to the opposition. I mean, my goodness gracious, 79%. You rarely get 79% of the country to agree on anything, but they do, in fact, agree on the idea of opposing transgender female athletes in women's sports.
It's shocking, and they're shocked by shocking goodness gracious shock. To put in perspective, that is, I'm pretty sure that they're referring to a survey that was done way back in January, and they're bringing it up today as if it's like, oh my gosh, breaking news, But even if we look back further, I can see all the way back to 2022, there are polls that are showing upwards around 70% of the voters, of respondents, were against having what they call trans females playing in girls or women's sports. 70%. 3 years ago. So why all of a sudden are they doing it like this? Because they didn't report on it back then. Before, they were either hiding the stories or making excuses. Now all of a sudden it's like, well, it seems as if the American sentiment has shifted. So, in other words, Democrats, maybe you have an excuse now in order to evolve your policy stances. That way we don't have to suffer another embarrassing loss in 2026. That's the only thing I can think of, because otherwise it doesn't make any sense. There's no reason for them to all of a sudden say, hey, you know what? Crazy. Did you know that just recently, it wasn't like this before, but just recently, Americans have shifted their sentiment to where now they are opposed to boys playing in girls' sports. That's crazy talk. I bet it will be a good time for Democrats to change that stance. I don't know if they're going to do that or not. I really don't. But whether they do, I hope they don't. I mean, I like that they're like this. I like that they continue to expose themselves, and that every time there's a vote asking whether or not asking a vote on a bill that would ban boys playing in girls' sports, they go out there and they virtue signal, and they're like, oh my gosh, this is so bigoted. This is going to hurt people, hurt women. If you stop letting boys play against women and defeat them handily in every sport, it's going to hurt women. They're still doing that even today, like they did it like a week and a half ago. So my question is, what's the plan? And it would appear as if they are trying to figure out a way to decouple themselves from the trans movement, the LGBTQIA plus supremacy movement agenda, trying to decouple themselves at least a little bit. They still want their support. They just don't want the attachment. They don't want to answer the question anymore, because every time they do, they look like fools. Do you know why? Because the idea of boys playing in girls' sports is foolish. All right, what's next on the agenda? We got, the jobs report. When it comes to economic, I don't want to say challenges, because there's always going to be economic challenge. When it comes to economic turmoil, financial turmoil, whether it's globally or centered here in the United States or at a state or local level, it always comes back down to the jobs aspect of it. Okay, jobs can fix things. Jobs can hurt things. In other words, if the jobs reports are looking good, we're in a forward progress trajectory. If the jobs reports look bad, again, whether it's locally, we've seen what happens when, like, for example, a plant closes down, and we've seen entire small towns that just essentially evaporate, right? They no longer have a reason to exist, and people start leaving, and there's those that cling to it and try to figure out some other way to keep people around. But once the jobs leave, the people leave. And the same thing can be said even at the national level, that as long as we can create jobs, other aspects of the economy they ebb and flow, they go up and down, the markets, crypto, currencies, status of the US dollar, consumer confidence, all of that stuff, that fluctuates, right? But if you can continue to make jobs, especially manufacturing jobs, then the economy can rebound from pretty much anything short of an economic collapse. That's why this is so important. So let's get into that story. White House hails positive jobs report. This comes to us from Daily Signal. George Caldwell reporting. Jobs report came out. It depends upon who you're asking. If you're asking CNN, it was by golly the worst darn jobs report that's ever been in the history of jobs reports, and the economy is tanking, and everybody hates Trump, and they all hate Doge, and they're all you silly people are regretting your vote right now, aren't you? They're trying to manufacture a narrative that just doesn't exist. But according to this article, let's see. Trump administration celebrated its first monthly jobs report Friday with the Bureau of Labor Statistics announcing the addition of more than 151,000 new jobs in February. In 1 month under President Trump, the American economy is soaring back to greatness after the economic calamity left by Joe Biden, and according to Carolyn Leavitt, White House press secretary. The manufacturing industry is already rebounding as there were 9,000 new auto jobs created, the most auto jobs added in 15 months. Under President Trump, the private sector is leading the way. 93% of the job gains in February were in the private sector. This is great news for the American people and American families. Let's go ahead and let's just play this video of President Trump.
During the last year, the Biden administration saw a loss of more than 110,000 manufacturing jobs, or 9,000 manufacturing jobs every single month. It averaged about 9,000 a month, 110,000 manufacturing jobs. During the first full month in office, we've not only stopped that manufacturing collapse, but we've begun to rapidly reverse it and get major gains. We created 10,000 manufacturing jobs in February alone. That hasn't happened in a long time. And these aren't government jobs, which actually we cut. These are private sector manufacturing jobs. So we gained all of those jobs, 10,000 jobs, and we barely started yet. That's a very unusual number. People are surprised by it. I'm even a little surprised. On auto jobs, we created almost 9,000 new jobs in the auto production field. And the reason for that is largely they think things are happening, so they're already geared up. In some cases, they had rooms in their plants, or they had empty plants that they were able to put into use quickly because they see, because of the tariffs, they don't want to be dealing with other places, and they don't want to go back and forth and around and through the borders and across Mexico border and Canada border and all of. They want to have the jobs in one location. And they've had space, and if they had space, they were able to create the jobs almost immediately. In some cases, they'll be building plants to take care of those jobs. So we created 9,000 new jobs already in the auto production, auto parts manufacturing. So we want the auto parts, ideally, and I think from a simplicity standpoint too, to be built and made in the United States. It's in a single month. That all took place in a single month, 9,000 new auto jobs. You haven't heard that in a long time.
You know, it really is a very good point that he made there. This is an opportunity. He didn't actually make the point, but he was starting to make the point, and I'm going to finish that point for him. This is a tremendous opportunity for the private sector to get a hold of a whole lot of, oftentimes, not all of them, but oftentimes very qualified people, as people are being released from their government jobs. It's also an opportunity for those people to get into the private sector and have a possibly greater opportunity. I don't want to speak for anybody or say, because if I say there's greater opportunity in the private sector, you're going to find somebody who's going to say, well, I had this and that and this, and then I lost it and I had to go, now I'm working as a blah, 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 and not getting paid as much and benefits and whatever. Yeah, I mean, there's going to be good and bad. We're going to go through rocky times. This, to me, the most telling part about this jobs report is the fact that it wasn't awful. Call me a pessimist. I was expecting it to be very bad based upon the loss of, obviously, the federal jobs, but also because of the potential for tariffs. I just wasn't sure that enough people would be hiring, and apparently they were. They have been hiring because they are feeling the increased optimism, the increased confidence in the future of the U.S. economy. Back to the article. The president's remarks echo those of Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent, who spoke at the Economic Club of New York on Thursday of a shift from a public sector economy to a private sector one. He says, when you think about 25% of the GDP flowing through the D.C.'s 202 area code, everybody's trying to skim a portion of it, trying to reallocate it. This has been a government-driven economy. You want to make this a private sector-driven economy. Amen to that. We want to, as I understand it, disempower the public federal bureaucracy and re-empower the kind of risk-taking and investment that goes along with private sector advances. And of course, President Trump had noted the advances in the automotive industry. This is something that has been, I have many friends in the automotive industry, and they if they were Democrats before, they shifted sides during the Biden years, because they quickly learned that U.S. manufacturing, especially in the automotive industry, is challenging when you have somebody like Joe Biden in office. When you had, at the time, in the first 2 years of the administration, you had Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House and Chuck Schumer as Senate Majority Leader. Things have obviously changed, and so has the automotive industry, and so has the sentiment within the automotive industry. This has been and should continue to be the backbone of American manufacturing. There are many things that we can and should be creating here, but the automotive industry is the one that we should not just be creating, we should be absolutely leading the entire world. We're not, but we can be. Again, continued economic numbers like these and watch them get even better as Trump's economic policies percolate, so to speak, and we should have a booming economy, and we should be able to make America prosperous again. Is cryptocurrency a safe investment to back your wealth or your retirement or your life's savings? The answer to that question is I have no idea. And I know that my sponsors probably just had a heart attack when I said that, but it's true. And here's the thing. Anybody who says that they know for sure whether cryptocurrencies are a good investment for this or that or the other, they're probably selling you something. One of the reasons that I personally like to work with Block Trust, the reason that I tell people to go to jdrcrypto.com so they can also consider working with Block Trust, is because they're straightforward, they're honest, but perhaps most importantly, they know what they don't know. That's why they rely on artificial intelligence-driven data to help them make decisions on your behalf. With their managed accounts, they can get you into crypto and have you trading like an expert without you actually having to become a crypto expert. They make moves. They try to get to determine, okay, is Bitcoin going to go up? Is it going to go down? Artificial intelligence tells us it's probably going to go down. Let's go ahead and pull everybody out of crypto, put them in cash for a while, and then once it hits a certain mark, then we'll put them right back in. We'll try to advance their portfolio, whether it's an IRA or 401k or, again, cash. They're extraordinarily easy to work with. Go to jdrcrypto.com to learn more. See what they say. This is a very patriotic company, a very bullish company when it comes to crypto for obvious reasons. But I want to be clear. Just like me, they were very skeptical about even getting into the industry prior to President Trump's election. Once President Trump was elected, it made sense. They worked with partners who've been in the crypto industry for years, platforms that have been used in the past by hedge funds. Now they are open to the public, and it is, again, because President Trump won. This has changed the game for cryptocurrency, and it is allowing Americans, of whether you're a crypto expert or a crypto novice or anywhere in between, this brave new world that we're experiencing in cryptocurrency can be most easily navigated by working with Block Trust. Go to jdrcrypto.com, see what they can do with your retirement, your cash, whatever. It's easy. And again, I'm not a financial advisor, so I'm not telling you, go buy crypto, go buy gold, go buy chickens. Actually, on that last one, it probably would be a good idea to go buy chickens. I said in the opening that a great deal of importance is placed on timing when it comes to the art of the deal. President Trump's timing, this administration, these first 2 months, I know it hasn't been too long, or what's week 6 or 7, so we still have a long way to go. But compared to his timing in the first administration, the first Trump administration, it's exponentially better. We even saw that, by the way, during the campaign. I would say that even his campaign timing in the second campaign was far better than in the first campaign. Now, how that translates We can say that, well, in the second campaign, he won by a landslide. He won every swing state. He moved everything. We could blame some of that on Kamala Harris. We can attribute some of that to the lack of success that the nation had under Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. But it really does, I think, a lot of it still has to do with timing. He just ran a fantastic campaign. And now we're seeing that he's running an even more fantastic administration so far this second term. It really does come down to timing. As far as the foreign affairs go, people are already complaining about the tariffs because, of course, they are. There's certain people, especially in media, that are going to complain no matter what Donald Trump says or does. And we saw that as well during his speech earlier in the week when Democrats even called them out for it. It's like, I could do anything. I could cure the most hideous disease, and they still wouldn't stand up. They still wouldn't clap, and he's absolutely right. Okay, but when it comes to this is going to be unambiguous. In other words, Democrats and legacy media are going to have a very hard time calling out President Trump if he's able to get a peace deal done between Ukraine and Russia, considering that Joe Biden couldn't come close to it, couldn't sniff it, or whoever's running the White House at the time, they couldn't sniff an end to the war or a ceasefire or a truce or anything for 3 years. And President Trump, if he can do it, let's say within the next 2 weeks, that means that he's getting it done in his first 2 months. And that's historic. You can't look at it any other way. So this one it's funny because it was actually two different stories that popped up at the same time. I decided to run them both together. So let's go into there. Peacemaker Trump has both Putin and Zelensky ready to agree to a truce. And if that does happen, which it appears, you never know, things can always change, but as of today, Friday, it does appear that both warring nations, their leaders, are interested in talking about peace as early as next week. We had two different stories, one from Zero Hedge, one from Bloomberg. One handled Putin, the other one handled Zelensky. Combine the two together, and we have what appears to be the mid stages. We're not even we're beyond the early stages. It appears that we might be at the mid stages of an historic peace agreement of some sort. Now, whether it's just a temporary truce, a little short ceasefire, opening of negotiations, or eventually a long-term or even a permanent peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia, that remains to be seen. We are worlds ahead of what Joe Biden and his administration were able to do in their 3 years with the war happening in Europe. And it took Trump about 7-8 weeks, we'll say, before he was able to put this piece together. Now, I'm not counting my chickens before they hatch. We're talking about the globalist elite cabal that's been pushing these people. We're talking about Vladimir Putin, who really, he needs a legacy of some sort, apparently, because he's really, really pushing this probably much further than he should have. We're seeing Zelensky, of course, who's out there trying to become the next, I don't know, I guess trying to get his next television gig or become United Nations Secretary General or both. One and the same, who knows? So, yeah, there are still things that have to be done, obstacles that need to be overcome, negotiations that need to be held, and actual peace agreements that need to be signed. But if anybody can do it, I believe that would be President Trump and the amazing team that he has put together. Between Marco Rubio and Mike Waltz, I think those two are going to be able to truly put everything together and then bring these two leaders who hate each other vehemently, bring them together and get something signed. But let's just do these. We'll just do both stories back to back. Vladimir Putin is ready for a truce with Ukraine as long as certain conditions are met. This comes to us today, but it's actually relatively old news. This happened last month during the negotiations in Saudi Arabia. You remember those negotiations, right? Those were the ones that everybody and their dog was freaking out about. You had the European Union leaders saying, this is an attack on democracy for Russia and the United States to be negotiating without without Ukraine and NATO and everybody else involved. And you had Democrats over here saying, oh my gosh, stop Trump. He's trying to end our war. I mean, we got to stop Trump. Of course, you have Vladimir Zelensky himself saying that he would not participate in any agreement for ceasefire or peace unless he was directly involved in the negotiations. In other words, he only wants peace. He only wants to save the lives of his people. If he gets the credit for it, he's a narcissist. He's a petulant child. Or as President Trump likes to say, he is a true tyrant. Yeah, this story comes to us from Bloomberg. Putin is said to be ready to agree to Ukraine truce with conditions. Russia is willing to discuss a temporary truce in Ukraine, provided there is progress toward a final peace settlement, according to people familiar with the matter in Moscow. In the first signal of a positive response from President Vladimir Putin to U.S. counterpart Donald Trump's calls for a ceasefire, the offer was conveyed at last month's talks in Saudi Arabia between top Russian and American officials, the people said, asking not to be identified, discussing internal policy. And I'm glad. This is one of those things where, some would argue that if they already had confirmation, or at least a signal from Vladimir Putin that he's ready for peace, then perhaps we should have talked about that. Perhaps President Trump should have brought that up. Well, guess what? He did, and nobody believed him. He actually did make multiple statements, comments about how in his discussions directly with Vladimir Putin, it wasn't just these talks. He's been talking to Putin directly. And the story should have been that Vladimir Putin is ready for peace. Instead, the story was, oh my gosh, Trump's talking to Putin. That's how legacy media treated that important story. But at least now, Bloomberg, thanks to Bloomberg, the truth is coming out. According to that article, in order to agree to cessation of hostilities, there would have to be a clear understanding about the framework principles of the final peace accord. Two people with knowledge of the matter said. Russia will insist in particular on establishing the parameters of an eventual peacekeeping mission, including agreements on which countries would take part, said another person familiar with the issue. Again, he's not making crazy demands here. And people, oh, you're a Putin apologist. Look, I want peace. President Trump wants peace. Hopefully, Lord willing, you want peace. We know that the Russian people want peace. We know that the Ukrainian people want peace. Now the questions are, does Vladimir Zelensky want peace? Does Vladimir Putin want peace? Those are the last two parts of the equation. And this is a confirmation that one of those parts, rumored, this is still not until it comes officially from Putin's mouth. We're still in rumor mode, but according to the rumors, he's ready for peace. So the question is Vladimir Zelensky ready for peace? He says he is. And if he really truly is, then he needs to sign the darn mineral agreement next week. One of the best ways to stay ahead of the deep state and to understand the machinations of the globalist elite cabal is to get information from people in the know, such as former CIA analyst Jim Rickards. Go to jdrucker.com/crisis, jdrucker.com/crisis, and see what information they have for you today. High-level U.S.-Ukraine meeting set for Riyadh after Volodymyr Zelensky, quote-unquote, apologizes. Now, let's address that up front. I don't think that he apologized. I think that President Trump is being kind. I think that he is allowing President Zelensky to save face in front of the world when he noted that there was an apology in the letter that Zelensky sent just prior to President Trump's address before Congress on Tuesday. Now, even Zelensky's own people are saying, yeah, there was no apology. But we're going to ignore that. We're going to bypass that. President Trump is not going to allow a narcissistic, petulant child and his overinflated ego get in the way of peace for his own country. President Trump is the bigger and better man by far in this situation. So I don't fault President Trump for saying there was an apology, because we need peace. He knows that. He wants that. But he's not willing to do crazy things in order to get it. And he's definitely not willing to offer, I hope he's not willing, to offer security agreements, because those will not bring peace. Those will result in World War III. Zelensky knows that. Putin knows that. President Trump knows that. And the globalists who are driving Zelensky, they know that because that's what they want. But let's get to this article about the potential for peace coming up. This comes to us from Zero Hedge. The U.S. and Ukraine will give it another try after the missiles for minerals deal has faltered amid President Zelensky's resistance to signing the deal. That's one way to put it. And the big diplomatic blow-up and spat of last Friday. Top U.S. and Ukrainian officials are expected to meet in Saudi Arabia next Wednesday to discuss a ceasefire effort with Russia, which will mark the first such high-level meeting since last Friday's public spat involving Zelensky at the White House. Not only were weapons shipments to Kiev suspended as of Monday, but U.S. intelligence sharing followed, and that's big. Max Blumenthal of the Gray Zone has aptly commented, Ukraine cannot carry out long-range attacks inside Russia without U.S. satellite guidance and intel. This is what we meant when we said the U.S. was waging a proxy war that tempted nuclear escalation. Yes, it was, and it no longer is. And I hope and pray that it never will. I hope that no deal that President Trump is willing to sign will include allowing Ukraine to continue to use us as their military puppets, the way that Joe Biden has for the last 3 years. We'll see how this plays out. Marco Rubio's there. Mike Waltz is there. I trust them. I think they're going to do what's best for the United States, and I think they're going to try to put a deal together that includes minerals, that will include a ceasefire. As long as there's no boots on the ground or security guarantees or anything like that, I'm fine. Okay? I just want the war to end as well. But I'm not willing to put U.S. forces, U.S. interests in danger just so that Ukraine can weasel their way out of this war. We want it to end, but we want it to end on our terms. Putin wants it to end on his terms. Zelensky wants it to end on his terms. I think that all three of those criteria can be met. It's going to require, though, Zelensky to take a very large step away from the warmongers that are trying to drive him into starting World War III. Saikat Chakrabarti. I want you to remember that name. I want you to memorize it. I want you to learn how to spell it, because I do believe that he is going to be the next member of Congress from the 12th District in California. He is the most radical or if he wins, he will be the most radical member of Congress that this nation has ever seen. By far, not even close. AOC, Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, you can go to the Senate and look at old Kamala Harris or Bernie Sanders or any of the radicals. They're practically right-wingers compared to Saikat Chakrabarti. And on top of he's not just unhinged leftist, he's also utterly brilliant. So please, I ask you, I know that this is maybe not the sexiest story out there, but pay attention, because this is a guy that's almost certainly going to, well, not almost certainly, he still has to beat Nancy Pelosi, which isn't exactly easy, but she's been doing it for 45 years. Democrats are looking for a change. I think that he's probably going to win. As a matter of fact, I don't think she's going to run. I think that she's going to see the writing on the wall. She's going to see the polls. She'd rather go out with dignity rather than getting beaten after 45 years, finally getting beaten in a primary by some snot-nosed Democrat. No, I think she'll see the writing on the wall, and she will back out, quote unquote, honorably, and pass the torch to the next generation of radicals. We'll see how that goes. But again, pay attention. Not a sexy story, but I would say definitely a very important one. Ex-AOC aide sets sights on Pelosi's seat in bold primary challenge. And I want to be very clear about something. Please pay attention. The person in question here is somebody that I consider to be one of the top 5 most dangerous leftists in America. And I have for a very long time. He fell off the radar for a bit. Now apparently he's working his way back on. And we need to pay attention, because he does have a bit of experience with unseating old Democrats, getting them out of the way for the fresh blood to come in. Let's go to the story first. This comes from Sarah Arnold over at townhall.com. Former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi faces an unexpected primary challenge from a former aide to Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. The challenger, who previously worked closely with the squad member, is positioning himself as a progressive alternative to the longtime Democrat leader, calling for fresh leadership and a stronger push for bold reforms. With Pelosi having held her seat for decades, this challenge signals a potential shift in the district's political landscape and sets the stage for a high-stakes race in the upcoming election. Saikat Chakrabarty announced his bid to challenge Pelosi for her seat, which she has held for nearly 45 years. In his campaign pitch, he cited concerns with new government regulations and an alternative vision to President Donald Trump's form of government. He said, "After serving as her campaign manager and first chief of staff, I returned to San Francisco, where for 5 years I've led a policy think tank that develops comprehensive solutions to the problems that both America and San Francisco faces," Chakrabarty wrote on X. "Now I want to bring those solutions to Congress. I'm going to run a very different kind of campaign than most. Instead of spending hours each day doing call time with big money donors, I'm going to spend every day talking with voters." I know, what a radical idea. Now, we'll get back into the article, but I want to just note a few things about Saikat Chakrabarty. It said that he's, a close aide. He was actually her chief of staff. He also ran her campaign to both during the primaries as well as during the general election, which was the easy part, but he ran an extraordinarily successful campaign to unseat a very popular Democrat incumbent and to bring in a former bartender and have her win the district and then rise very quickly in the ranks to be maybe not powerful necessarily within the Democrat Party, but at least one of the most outspoken and often quoted Democrats out there. He was her chief of staff. He wasn't just an aide. He was also the person who was responsible, greatest responsibility, for even recruiting her in the first place. He was one of the founders of Justice Democrats. And I'll get to his big accomplishment here in a second. But I want to note something about his time. When he left, I had thought that he was going to be essentially infiltrating Congress way back when as chief of staff for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I thought that she was she's just going to go out there and be the face of the squad, the Justice Democrats, help to recruit new members, help to push a leftist ideology, but that behind the scenes he would be working within Congress, working with other chiefs of staff, as well as even other members of Congress, to try to push the agenda to the left. This man is a hardcore, full-blown Marxist. And when I say that, I'm not saying, we often throw around there, he's a socialist, he's a communist, he's a Marxist. With Saikat Chakrabarty, he is legitimately a Marxist. He wants to end capitalism in the United States. He wants to end our democratic and constitutional republic, democratic form of I know we're not a democracy, but he wants to end the democratic form of government that we have, which is to end our constitutional republic. He truly wants to do these things. Now, his resume, which is very quiet and has been quiet up until I'm sure he's going to roll it out during the campaign, but this is the man who is the architect of something that everybody's heard of, that people often attribute incorrectly to people like Bernie Sanders or Markey or Ocasio-Cortez or whoever. No, it was Saikat Chakrabarty who developed the Green New Deal. He's the one who even was so bold as to go out there and do an interview way back in, I believe it was, 2019 maybe? He did an interview where he declared, perhaps too boldly, because I think this might have been one of the reasons that he ended up having to leave. But he declared that the Green New Deal really wasn't about climate change, and it really is about economic upheaval. He's a huge proponent of modern monetary theory. He does not believe in ownership by anyone other than the government. Basically think of him as the America's version of Yuval Noah Harari, who is, of course, the spirit animal of the World Economic Forum. Some would argue that he is actually more in charge of the WEF than even Klaus Schwab. That's who Saikat Chakrabarti is. He's very much like Yuval Noah Harari. And I would even argue that when it comes to governance and economics, that he's to the left of the radical globalist Yuval Noah Harari. This man is extremely dangerous, but he's also very, very intelligent. And if anybody could unseat Nancy Pelosi, it would be him. And I would argue that he wouldn't even try if he didn't have some insight into his ability to actually defeat her. She is 84, okay? And as they noted in the article, she's been there for 45 years. The Democrat Party is ripe to want fresh blood. They are very mad. Democrat voters are very mad about their 2024 election fortunes. They are looking for something new, something better, something bigger, something bolder than what Nancy Pelosi brings to the table. And as her own mental acuity issues start to creep in, as her own flaws, and as more attention is paid to her sins, especially as it pertains to her husband and their magical stock market run that they've had all these years to become filthy rich, I think that he has. If I were forced to put a bet down today, with no knowledge of how he's going to actually run the campaign, well, I guess some speculation, but without seeing him on the campaign trail, just seeing him in the past, knowing his mind, knowing his ideology, knowing his district, they're going to love him. They're going to love him more than they've loved Nancy Pelosi for nearly half a century. And because of her age, because of the weakness of the Democrat Party today, I would say that he is a better than 60% chance of defeating her in a primary. As impossible as that would have sounded just 2 or 3 years ago, today I think that it's likely. I think that Nancy Pelosi is done. I think that it might be so bad for her that she announces before the election that she's retiring finally. And nobody would hold that against her. She's in her 80s. She's been doing this for half a century. She's no longer Speaker of the House. She's done her work. She's done her sins. She's done her crimes. It's time for her to move on. And Saikat Chakrabarti, unfortunately, is the right person to move her along. Let's get back to the article. He suggested he would begin at the grassroots by holding online meetings with voters as he prepares to campaign for California's 12th congressional district. Watching Trump and Elon freely unleash chaos in their illegal seizures of government, it's become clear to me that the Democrat Party needs new leadership, he said. I'm going to find every way I can to try to talk to everybody that I possibly can in San Francisco and get my message directly to them. Now, for those who aren't from out here in California, you might not realize that San Francisco is actually very small. I mean, relative to San Diego, obviously Los Angeles, San Jose, San Francisco, the Bay Area is very compact, very tiny, very easy to get around. I mean, when he says he wants to talk to everybody there, that's not inconceivable. He really probably could. Not literally everybody, but talk to enough people to make them believe that he is the future of the party. And if he were to win, he would definitely become more dangerous than any other member of the squad. He would become the de facto leader of the squad. They would turn to him because, again, I cannot stress this enough. This man is brilliant. I need everyone to understand how dangerous he is. AOC, we can make fun of her. She makes mistakes. She's a dimwit. Ilhan Omar says all of the evil things that she says, and her allegiance is very clear and unambiguously for Islam and for Somalia. Of course, Rashida Tlaib, Presley, all of them. So their shine, their shimmer has been diminished greatly. It's one of the reasons why Cori Bush lost. One of the reasons that Jamal Bowman lost. Of course, the pulling of the fire alarm didn't help his cause. But the squad, the so-called squad, it was rising really fast, and all of a sudden it just crashed and burned because, and I would argue that this is definitely the case, it's because Saikat Chakrabarti left left AOC staff. I think that if and I don't know the background. I don't know why he left. It was sudden. Okay. I thought maybe he gotten involved in some kind of scandal they were trying to cover up, but now it's been 5 years and, well, he did his time at the think tank where he was able to do quite a bit of damage, to be clear. I'll talk about everything he did there at some other segment. But again, if he is able to win, to defeat Nancy Pelosi in the primary, whether by talking her into leaving or just defeating her outright, he will win the general election, of course, in that district by a landslide. No other challenger. Well, there would probably be no Republican challenger, and no other Democrat challenger would be able to come close. So he might actually end up having to beat Nancy Pelosi twice. We'll get into that when it comes. Point being is this: keep your eye on him. Don't disregard it. Don't be like, oh, Nancy Pelosi could never lose a primary. If anybody could beat her in a primary, it would be him. And again, let's not forget, he has experience with taking a longtime popular incumbent Democrat and defeating them with somebody who's relatively unknown. He's not nearly as unknown as AOC was. And he's in a district that's to the left of the Bronx, believe it or not. So, she's in her 80s. He's young. He's very well spoken. She sounds like she's on her third shot of vodka every time she speaks. The atmosphere is ripe for massive change in the Democrat Party. I think it's a foregone conclusion. I think he's going to be in Congress, and when he's there, he's going to be extremely dangerous. Is the bird flu just the latest example of the powers that be attacking our food supply? I would argue that yes, it almost certainly is. Now, I'm not a doctor, not a scientist. I'm not sitting there in a laboratory looking into bird flu and trying to figure out if it was man-made or if it's, really spreading to whoever, or if it's in this milk or that chicken or those eggs or whatever. I'm not doing any of that. All I'm doing is looking at the writing on the wall. And the writing on the wall for the last few years has said, hey, they're attacking our food supply. It was Klaus Schwab. No. Sorry, it was the other guy, Henry Kissinger. There we go. His predecessor, his mentor. It was Henry Kissinger who said, who controls the food supply can control the people. And it seems as if that's exactly what they are trying to do. I'm a huge fan of, number one, freeze drying your own food, okay? If you have the time and the money, go get you a freeze dryer. You can go to jdrucker.com/harvest, jdrucker.com/harvest to get you a very high quality freeze dryer, the freeze dryer that we use in my companies. Or if you don't want to spend that kind of money, because they're pretty expensive, or you don't have the time or the energy or whatever, you don't want to do it yourself, it's time to stock up on long-term storage food. You can find 4 awesome options, ways that you can start to accumulate, or continue if you already started, to accumulate high-quality, long-term storage food, oftentimes food that will last 25 years. Start getting it built up as best you can, because there may come a time in the not-too-distant future when acquiring food will not be as easy as it is today here in the United States of America. We're already seeing inflation. That's already hitting us. What happens if they inflate it all the way? What if they really try to make us eat lab-grown meat, quote-unquote meat abominations, or whatever, lab-grown something, GMO this, GMO that, or heck, bugs, crickets, cricket burgers. Get in line for your mealworm bread, the mealworm bread lines. Gosh, so many possible ways that they can come after us, attacking food production plants, again, bird flu, whatever. And I don't think, people, well, no, the Trump administration won't do that. I don't think this is the Trump administration, to be clear. If anything, I would say that the most likely candidate, of course, is the globalist elite cabal. Second most likely candidate would be communist China. There's a reason why they're buying up as much farmland as possible. And for whatever reason, we've allowed that. But hey, I'm focused on the future. Go to jdrucker.com/food, jdrucker.com/food, and stock up on as much long-term storage food as you can. All right, let's get into the big story. This is the juicy story. This is the one that we have, at least as I'm doing this show. If you're watching the replay, then it's not the case. But as I'm here live, this is a story that we actually have at the top of thelibertydaily.com because it's getting a lot of attention. People are chiming in, commenting, and it's an important story. It's getting completely buried or not covered very well at all, even by conservative media. To be clear, there are a few in conservative media who are covering it, but not nearly enough. This is a bombshell, and it could have implications that stretch on for years. And this, to me, could be the fabled constitutional crisis that a lot of media members like to talk about, but that never ends up being the case. This could be the case. This could be an actual, real, legitimate constitutional crisis. And if it is, it's not necessarily a bad one, because it would mean that what's at stake is the reversal of pretty much everything Joe Biden has done. It's just a question of, do we negate the last 2 months, 3 months, 8 months, 12 months, 2 years, all of it? That, to me, is the big question. But first, we got to get past the easy question, which is, should they be overturned, voided, deleted, removed? We'll see. President Autopen ran the U.S. government for 4 years. This story is an absolute positive bombshell. We covered it when it was originally reported that Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey had requested an investigation from the Department of Justice into basically who was running the country instead of Joe Biden, because it seems pretty darn clear, and many of us have known this for a long time, it seems pretty darn clear that Joe Biden does not and did not have the mental acuity to do really anything as far as presidential duties, which means that he should have been removed. And the fact that he wasn't removed means that somebody was making decisions. Now, there's been speculation. Nobody thinks it's Kamala Harris is the funny part. There's been speculation that it was aides, interns, Dr. Taco Jill Biden, and even Hunter Biden. All these names have been floated as possible people who were actually making decisions on behalf of the Oval Office for weeks, months, maybe even years. Now, you'd think that a story like that would get picked up across the board, but according to Straight Arrow News, which is, you can find at SAN.com, which, by the way, just as a quick note, it's a great resource. You want to see who's covering a story, or in this case, who's not covering a story? This is the place to go, because they try to keep track of who on the left, center, and right is actually covering particular stories, and then trying to figure out, basically which direction a story leans. In this case, they're talking about the Missouri AG calls for DOJ investigation into claims about Biden's mental fitness. Again, we covered this story a couple of days ago, even though apparently we're not considered media, even though I know for certainty that we get more traffic than at least 3 or 4, maybe even 5 of those sites, but whatever. So who covered it? Anybody on the far left? 0. Left? 0. Even left-leaning? 0. We get to the center, and yeah, there was vinnews.com, vinnews.com, and Newsweek covered it. Hot Air, right-leaning site, covered it. Of course, Daily Caller, they covered it. We covered it with them. Daily Wire, redstate.com, patriotnewsfeed.com. Wow. Gateway Pundit, Twitchy, Pamela Geller, and Clash Daily, the good folks over that, one of my favorite sites. But otherwise, nobody on the left covered this, and for obvious reasons. I mean, this is, the insinuation here is that not only would this damage the reputation of the Democrat Party and anybody who's involved in the Biden White House, not that either of those need any more damaging, but more importantly, it could, if Andrew Bailey is able to be successful, if Pam Bondi actually does her job, then it's possible that some or even all of the actions taken by the administration for an extended period of time, again, whether it's weeks, months, or years, that's to be determined, but we know that for at least a certain period of time, it was not the President of the United States who was acting as President of the United States. And according to Maura Dowling over at Independent Sentinel, we're going to call whoever was running it President Autopen. I love it. New questions arose over who ran the government when the incapacitated Joe Biden was president, over the use of Autopen, and over unmatching signatures. The question became who was behind the Autopens. Shouldn't we know who was signing executive orders and memos? Autopen signed everything. Heritage Oversight collected everything that Joe Biden had signed over 4 years. Autopen signed every document. Now, we've seen President Trump sit there at those ceremonies. We just have more today. Anytime he's in the Oval Office or wherever he is, sometimes not even in the Oval Office, he goes and he signs an executive order. Somebody tells him what's in it. Sometimes he'll read parts of it. He'll talk about how important it is. He'll sit there. Cameras are blaring. Reporters are asking idiotic questions half the time. And he puts that big, bold signature on there, lifts it up, shows it to everybody, and then moves on to the next one. That is his signature. Apparently, Joe Biden was not actually signing any of the executive orders that he allegedly signed, which means many, if not most, if not all of them, are no longer valid. Never should have been valid, and somebody should be investigated and sent to jail. But at the very least, some of his stuff, including pardons, by the way, Anthony Fauci, some of his actions should be reversed. Heritage Oversight gathered every document they could find with Joe Biden's signature throughout his presidency. They all used the same Autopen signature, except for the announcement that the former president was dropping out of the race last year. He had one decision to make, and that was the one. Many didn't believe the president had signed his resignation. Who had the Autopen? Some people need to hang for this. It's treasonous. And according to Mike Howell, there is a constitutional process to deal with an incapacitated POTUS, and it doesn't contemplate giving someone else his Autopen and authority. It's called the 25th Amendment, and the conspiracy not to invoke it in order to keep whatever they were doing going is a big problem. And that's very important, because here's the thing. Somebody was given the option, right? Somebody was given the choice, and maybe multiple people. Maybe it's a conspiracy. We could almost assume that that's the case. But some people had the choice. They could either do what they're supposed to do based upon their duty to the Constitution, which is to invoke the 25th Amendment and declare through the cabinet, through the vice president, that the president of the United States is incapacitated in some way, in this case based upon mental acuity through dementia. And then he is removed, or in this case it's a he. I guess if there's a female president, it would be a she. The president is removed and replaced by the vice president. In this case, it would have been Kamala Harris. But here's the thing. Kamala Harris might be stupid, but she would sign her own stuff. She would basically try to, fail at, but at least try to run the government. It seems as if Joe Biden was not even trying to run the government. He was letting whoever was controlling him, his handlers, do everything for him. He was barely there, essentially. Back to the article. The NSC advisor spills the beans. NSC advisor described Joe Biden as dead, a man who can't say a sentence. He'll be dead in a year. He'll be out of public life. Everybody recognize it. I can't believe it wasn't a bigger scandal earlier. This backs up what Speaker Johnson had said, who Joe Biden didn't remember signing an executive order on liquid natural gas. We've got those videos. I'm not going to play the videos themselves. You've probably already seen them. And if not, I'll leave a link to, if you haven't seen them, you should. One is an undercover O'Keefe Media. James O'Keefe, one of his undercover operatives, went and got somebody to spill the beans from within the White House. And the other one was an interview with Speaker of the House Mike Johnson. So you can always go to independentsentinel.com and watch those videos. But here's the investigation request. Missouri Attorney General Andrew Bailey asked the DOJ to investigate whether Biden's cognitive mental decline allowed that too. No, I guess they were potentially related. Unelected officials to make decisions without his knowledge or approval. If that's the case, Biden's executive orders, pardons, and other actions may be unconstitutional and therefore void. Guys, I can't stress this enough. This is a huge deal. if somebody else was making the decision as to whether or not to sign an executive order that was allegedly signed by the President of the United States, that executive order does not exist. It is void. It has to be void. The entire intention of signing an executive order is that the executive order itself was signed by the president at the very least. We have to determine, this is a separate issue, but is Autopen, is that valid for executive orders? It's sort of like, I know if you do like a DocuSign, that's technically like an Autopen, but apparently Joe Biden, somebody was imprinting basically, or fake, I should say, I don't know how Autopen works. I assume that it is a physical, it's not just printed on there, that it's actually a physical thing that takes a pen and goes through the motion of signing a document or whatever. Because these are physical documents. These aren't digital. Executive orders we've all seen them. They're in binders, big, beautiful binders, big letters, and there's a big thing at the bottom for the president to sign. And at least with President Trump, we get to see him sign it. Apparently with Joe Biden, somebody else was doing the signing for him. Now, of course, their argument is going to be like, no, he he did all the signing. He knew what he was signing. He was just having the Autopen do the physical signature for him. That may actually, believe it or not, that may actually invalidate these. We're not talking about a DocuSign. We're talking about an executive order from the President of the United States of America. In my books, that's a no-brainer. I mean, everything that he has done must be called into question. If he was and let's say, forget the signature aspect of it. Let's say he was so incapacitated that he was no longer able to make decisions for himself. That would mean that he would also not be able to make decisions for the nation, in which case, once again, the executive orders should be challenged. Every single one of them should be challenged via lawsuit, via investigation and lawsuit, all the way up to the top. According to, and I did read what Attorney General Andrew Bailey had sent. He's already, the guy is wicked smart, by the way. He's the type of guy you want to see in every state as an attorney general. He made sure that in his request, as a preliminary ahead of any potential lawsuits, he made sure to establish why this is important to him. He's trying to establish standing because, you could say, well, it's none of the Missouri's business that this executive orders were signed. Well, actually it is, as he noted, specifically in regards to pardoned convicted murderers. Okay, in Missouri. That should, by, my non-legal scholar perspective, that should give him standing. But it shouldn't have to come to that. It really shouldn't. His job should be over. At this point, his job, at least in this regard. He sent the request to the Department of Justice. Ball is in their court. They should now be engaged immediately. It should already be in process or in progress. They should be investigating who was doing the signing and start rounding people up. Start questioning everybody who had access to Joe Biden. Which aides, which cabinet members, which interns, which wives, which sons, which brothers, which whoever, who was making decisions about executive actions that Joe Biden allegedly signed. Because if it can be demonstrated that not only did he not sign it, but he was also unaware of what was going on or what was supposedly being signed on his behalf, well, that should nullify everything. And then it's just a question of how long. Do we go back 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years, the entirety of his term? Can we nullify, essentially, the executive action aspect of Joe Biden's term in the Oval Office? Now, what's not being covered by anybody so far is the question of the laws. For a law to go into effect, that does require the president to sign it, or for Congress and the Senate to overrule him with a supermajority in both chambers to undo his veto. Well, overturn his veto. Well, if he signed, or if somebody else signed all of these various pieces of legislation into law, and he was not the one who was actually signing it, does that mean that any law passed during Biden's administration, or at least through, we'll call it the dementia period, the lost acuity period, the 25th Amendment, or should have been 25th Amendment period, are any of those laws still valid? People talk about, people in the media, especially legacy media, they talk about how Trump is engaged in this constitutional crisis. Oh my gosh, Elon Musk is becoming a walking constitutional crisis. Blah, blah, blah. Well, this is a true, legitimate, full-blown constitutional crisis. And we need to pay attention to this. We need to make sure that President Trump is apprised of everything that's happening. We need to make sure that Pam Bondi is taking this seriously and putting the full efforts of the Department of Justice behind finding out and determining what crimes were committed. And if they determine that it's not necessarily a criminal action, but there does seem to be reason to doubt the acuity of the President of the United States at the time, then it'll go back to Attorney General Andrew Bailey, and I'm sure a coalition of other attorneys general in the United States, Republicans, of course, that will then be on them to file suit and to determine basically what did Joe Biden do that they can have overruled. All of this, if it's done right, will make it all the way through to the Supreme Court, and I would imagine that at that point, when it will be unignorable by legacy media and will be a full-blown constitutional crisis, at that point we will truly see if there is this massive flaw in our style of government, because this is it. Okay, this is that constitutional crisis that everybody has been falsely accusing other circumstances and instances of being. This is the one. How will we react as a nation? And honestly, I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question. All right, friends, thank you so much for watching another episode of the JD Rucker Show. Please be sure to subscribe if you have not already. I don't care if you're watching on YouTube, X, Rumble, Getter, BitChute, doesn't matter. Subscribe to all of them. You can find the places to subscribe over at jdrucker.com/find, jdrucker.com/find. Minor announcement, not a big deal, but we have revived our Apple podcast. But here's the weird part. It's definitely weird. We're not putting our whole shows on there. Not yet. Maybe we will in the future, but right now we're going for the quick hits, the 15, 20-minute, sometimes even as short as 10-minute shows, just to get it jump-started, just because I don't want to throw out there, an hour and a half show, and people are like, this is a long show, which, by the way, to me, that's not a long show at all. I could do this and I have done this for 3-4 hours at a time, in multiple sittings a day even. So, hour and a half, piece of cake. But, as we're getting it built up, we do want, one of the reasons, I'll admit it, one of the reasons that I really stopped paying attention to Apple Podcasts was because I assumed that at some point they were going to go do me just like Spotify did me. Spotify banned me like way back in like December 2020 or something like that. I'm pretty sure it was December 2020 they banned me. I was banned before pretty much anybody else. They don't ban anybody if you're not saying anything illegal, which I wasn't, but they definitely banned me. And I thought that at any point Apple was going to do the same, but to their credit, they haven't. At one point my Apple podcast was actually pretty popular. We were in the top 20 in the news category. We were ahead of some pretty big shows. Names, I'm not saying, oh my gosh, everybody was listening to me. It's just the way that Apple podcast stats work. But we had a very good following, and I need to, we are trying to revive that. So if you could subscribe to me there, that would be fantastic. Just go to Apple Podcasts and do a search for the JD Rucker Show, or just go, as a matter of fact, just go to jdrucker.com/find, and you will find my Apple Podcast link there. So check that out. We need subscribers on YouTube badly. We need them everywhere. And people ask, oh, why are you on YouTube? I thought you hate YouTube. I do. But we need YouTube. YouTube does very well in search, whereas Rumble, Brighteon, BitChute, Getter, they don't do very well in search. So if our intention, which it is, our intention is to reach as many Americans as possible with every single show, then that means paying attention to, and to be fair, I mean, I've had a lot of incredible engagement. We don't get a lot of views yet, but we do get the people that are watching the show on YouTube. They're fantastic. Love you guys. So watch me there, Rumble, all the various places. You can, again, check me out at jdrucker.com/find. Give me the thumbs up. We need the thumbs ups as much as possible. Desperate for the thumbs up. We really want those we want those numbers to go up because apparently, like, I had one guy who he said, he asked me this. He's like, what are you doing? How are you getting all these views, but nobody thumbs you up? It's like, I don't know. I guess they don't like me. He's like, no, I watch your show. I can tell they like you. It's like, thanks. But why don't they give you thumbs up or likes or whatever? I'm like, that's just not their style. He said, well, you need to ask for it more. So I went the entire show. I didn't ask for it because I'm horrible at this promotional stuff. But hey, here I am now. Give me a thumbs up, please. See, it just popped up right there. See, thumbs up. There you go. And that bell thing, whatever that means, I think that means to get notifications. I don't even know how to do that stuff. I'm just the pretty face behind the camera, okay? Or in front of the camera, I guess. I am also behind the camera as well, but that's a whole other discussion. All right, enough babbling. Thank you all for watching. Lord willing, I will be back very soon with another episode. But in the meantime, you all stay strong, stay safe, and God bless.
I'm Jonathan Rose, CEO of Genesis Gold Group. As Americans, we work hard every day to provide for our families and ensure their future. But with the uncertainty facing our economy, it is more important than ever to safeguard your wealth and protect your retirement savings. Educated investors look to safe haven assets to shield themselves from the economic storm. Tangible assets like gold and silver can provide stability, security, and most importantly, peace of mind. In 1997, the Taxpayer Relief Act allowed Americans to hold physical precious metals like gold and silver in their IRAs for the first time. Today, Genesis Gold Group helps our clients transfer existing IRAs, 401ks, and other retirement accounts into physical gold and silver, tax and penalty free. With thousands of satisfied clients, 5-star reviews, and fully accredited with the Better Business Bureau, our experienced team is here to help you navigate the process. Start to finish, now is the time to educate yourself on the importance of a diversified portfolio, including tangible assets like gold and silver. Call now to receive our free wealth protection kit and digital dollar defense guide. Call now and we'll include our extremely popular silver prepper bar free when you open your account. Add it to your IRA or have it sent to your home. Call Genesis Gold Group today at 800-200-GOLD. Prepper bar only available through Genesis Gold Group.